A young man has died after a shocking traffic accident in Marsa. A worker facing eviction was allegedly assaulted after leaving his job in Malta, and a student was blocked from graduation over her vaccine status despite medical issues. All this and more on Lovin Daily. Good evening, Malta and Gozo. Johnathan Chile here, joined by David Greg Orpani. Unfortunately, today there was a major tragedy on the roads that's been dominating headlines. David is here with the details.
Yeah, so the freak Marsa accident today claimed the life of a 28-year-old man from Nepal. It all happened at around 11:30. It was on Trialdamoro Road, which, as we all know, is one of the busiest roads in Malta. And because of that, within minutes, photos, videos started circulating online. Now, what happened was that a large truck, being driven by a 56-year-old man from Bormla, was carrying a lot of metal sheets and parts. It lost control, spun, hit the center strip, turned over. It dragged across the road. It hit two cars and a lamppost, and that last part is unfortunately where the tragic freak accident happened, because the lamppost seems to have hit a young motorcyclist who was driving on the opposite lane, some 4 lanes away. Extremely shocking, extremely unfortunate accident. The man is mere 28 years old, from Nepal. He happened to be a Bolt driver, as most people noticed the popular green food courier bag on the side. A lot of photos and a lot of videos started circulating online, most notably by Jordan Grech, who spoke to Lovin Malta on the shocking incident. He happened to have a food truck just mere meters away. He described, the emotional scenes where it happened. Of course, the chaos that happened with all the police officers. Unfortunately, there was a police officer who was driving just in front of the truck, so he did stop and manage emergency services quite quickly. The ambulance apparently got extremely there quickly, but unfortunately, it was a little bit too late for this young man. Large congestion, as expected. I mean, this is a very, very main road. Skate park, Imriel, Birkirkara, Ormi, Valletta, Zabuc, all recorded and reported heavy traffic. Some of them right up till right now. I mean, the truck was only lifted about an hour ago, so traffic southbound is extremely heavily limited, and we would definitely recommend avoiding the area if possible, but of course, more importantly, our condolences to this young man.
Absolutely, yeah. I just passed through Marsa actually on the way here. I was there not half an hour ago, and it is, as David said, chock-a-block. If you are planning to go southbound to Marsa today, try and avoid it. The traffic was really, really crazy down there. And obviously, Lovin Malta sends its condolences to the family of the man as well as the Nepalese community in Malta. Moving on to the next story. A bit of a shocking story that Lovin Malta broke today. Maybe you've seen the video. So a worker is now facing eviction after attempting to leave a job where he felt like he was being exploited in. And as he tried to, leave this job, he was actually assaulted by his employer/landlord. So this story revolves around the man Akram Shabazz, who spoke to Lovin Malta editor Julian Bonici, who broke the story today. And basically, he's revealed a very strange situation. Shabazz and some other workers were both employed by a man, but also rented from the man. So they were in a very awkward position where they, worked for a person, had to get their wage from that person, but they were also paying rent to that person. And when the worker, Akram, tried to leave his job to find a new job, he ended up getting assaulted in footage that was sent to Lovin Malta. So we've actually published this footage. You're seeing it right now on your screens. And in the footage, landlord and employer Pierre William Buontempo can be seen, engaging physically with one of the men. The man seems to be pushing back as well. Some other men jump in between them, try to stop them. It seems like it's a very heated situation. We spoke to Buontempo, who said, listen, he said he never assaulted anyone, and he also insisted that men were poor tenants who did not pay their rent, even though Lovin Malta has seen proof of transfer for the rent of February. However, I think this story just goes to show kind of the extremely problematic situation that some foreign third country national workers can find themselves in, especially if they're paying rent to the same person that employs them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, of course, like we ourselves we're discussing, in every video, there's two sides to every story, and it definitely doesn't appear to be, it seems like the commotion had been happening even before the camera started rolling, but regardless of that, regardless of maybe who said what and what really transpired, I don't think it's really something that you would want in a relationship, definitely between an employer and an employee, and also between a landlord and a tenant. So, as for Akram and his friends, I mean, this was probably some. It should have been, this great opportunity to find job, to find residence, and all of that, and instead it turned quite sour quite quickly. We will keep you posted on any future updates on that story. Meanwhile, a 26-year-old university graduate has missed out on celebrating one of the most important parts of her life, really, graduating. This story is about Pamela Buttigieg, who graduated with a master's degree in teaching and learning back in 2020. Of course, the graduation was postponed back then due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 2021 wasn't all that better, but when it came to 2022, it seems like she's actually not going to be able to celebrate it because of a rather weird technicality where her exemption from not taking the booster was not accepted. Pamela Buttigieg spoke to Lovin Malta, saying that she has pelvic congestion syndrome and polycystic ovaries. There are real medical concerns of complications should she take the booster, and she knows because she's already been through this once before, back in 2021 when she was vaccinated the first time. She talked about she spent 3 years trying to manage all this excessive pain that she had, even like blood loss, and after vaccines everything started again. So even her gynecologist issued an exemption. It wasn't accepted from the authorities, and Pamela is saying this anxiety is not fair. She does understand that there are rules. This is not some sort of I don't agree with the boosters. This is genuinely, in her opinion, of course, that they are breaching her human rights because of this genuine exemption. And I tend to agree. I mean, of course, there are rules and there are rules to be abided by, but there are exceptions to those rules, especially if you are trying to protect someone's health, ironically, by putting them in this weird situation, which will only make them feel worse. I think it's quite ridiculous.
Moving on to the next story, the chairman and CEO of PBS is being paid €80,000 a year. This figure was actually released after PNMP Joe Ellis asked a parliamentary question with Minister Carmelo Abela explaining the figure. A copy of the contract, which was also requested, was not given. Now, this is a bit interesting because Mark Samut, just recently took on the role. I think it was April 2021, so he's not even been in the role for a year. And there was a lot of criticism over his role. The first part of criticism was that he didn't have the experience to be both CEO and chairman of Malta's national broadcasting station. And obviously, this comes as the PBS has had a pretty rough year. There's been accusations that TVM is no longer impartial. We had, the host of a very popular show, L'Erba Fossil Jemma, Mark Lawrence Zamit, saying, listen, I'm leaving the show, I'm leaving the station because there's constant interference from the higher ups at PBS. So, time will tell to see if Mark Samut, continues this legacy of impartiality at PBS, at TVM, or whether, he takes this €80,000 a year that is from taxpayer money and, turns a new leaf for the national broadcaster.
Yeah, I mean, and you can definitely. There's a lot of arguments to be made on whether that 80,000 is enough, or it is merited, or it should be more, it should be less. I think that's beyond the point, really. I think the argument here is that we've heard, our public broadcaster being plagued by quite a lot of issues like you mentioned, John, of impartiality. There are even reports alleging that PBS is facing some issues with debt. I mean, we have touched upon these arguments many a time. We even have a campaign on kashater.com that you can follow. Only time will tell, but considering all these controversies and all these, our main news broadcaster being in the news for all the wrong reasons, here's hoping that, we find some sort of remedy for this. Actually, speaking of finding remedies for something that might actually be quite controversial, Transport Minister Ian Borch has hinted that a remedy for the cancelled Malta Marathon could be found after all. This comes after last night's emotional post by the Malta Marathon saying that the marathon would need to be called off. It was called off following this meeting between the organisers themselves, the Malta Marathon Organising Committee and Transport Malta. Transport Malta have held their ground as they have multiple times against the proposed route. Of course, some major things have happened between Mdina and Attard, if you recall recently, so you have a central link and all of that. The MMOC, the organising committee, has said that the route potentially endangers lives and even causes problems for drivers. Transport Malta held their ground. An agreement wasn't reached. COVID didn't help, and therefore it was cancelled. Now, it's quite saddening as well for athletes and for Malta's, aspiring athletes as well. I count myself as definitely neither, but I still took part in it because it's a great endeavour. In its 37-year history, this would be the third time only that that the marathon wouldn't have taken place. 2019 was the first one due to harsh weather. 2021 due to COVID, and now this. But Minister Ian Borch, in speaking to the Times earlier today, has hinted at a solution and that more information will be communicated shortly. Just before we started the programme, there were also indications that the 6th March date might go ahead as planned anyway. Here's hoping that a remedy can be found and that we will actually end up, getting fit again after these 2 years stuck indoors.
Yes, if the marathon does go ahead, we'll definitely be announcing that immediately on Lovin Malta. I think back in 2018 was when Lovin Malta had actually, as a company, taken on the marathon, the half marathon, right? Marathon. The half marathon. And it is a bit grueling. As someone who doesn't work out enough, it is definitely, quite harsh on the calves, I can tell you that. So here's hoping that, they do announce it this year. I do urge anyone, if they do announce it, to go for it. It's a bit of a challenge, but afterwards you're feeling great. You can't really walk very well for a couple of days, but, you've done something very, very good and you contributed back to charity. I think that brings us to the end of today's episode, both from myself and David. Have an evening full of lovin'.